Given your
again?
extensive
Okay.
work and research on the topic of UAPs, what prompted the decision to translate this complex subject matter into a format that's accessible for children?
Um, it's a great question because the subject matter is very complex and mysterious and very difficult for parents and teachers and acquaintances of young people to introduce to children. So we thought we'd provide a primer with some of the basic facts and obviously everything very verifiable. No fiction, no silliness, just bare bone facts to give people a tool to start the conversation. And that's what we hope the book will do.
It's a great book, by the way.
Thank you.
How did your experience writing about UAPs for a more general audience in the paper, and often, wait, sorry, I skipped ahead. For a more general audience, inform your approach to writing a children's book?
Well, I mean, I was working on my book about John Mack, and I had covered a number of UAP stories, broken a couple of big UA stories in the New York Times with Leslie Kane and Helene Cooper about the secret Pentagon unit investigating UAPs, UFOs. So I'd been working on it, and Debbie was listening to me, do interviews on the phone, and she's an expert in children's books. So she got the idea, well, why don't we collaborate, which we've never done before, on a children's book. So that's really how the idea grew.
And, actually, journalism is wonderful. In the study of journalism actually prepares you to write for children's books, because what you're doing is taking a complex subject and breaking it down and explaining it to readers who are not experts in the field. So, having done that, Ralph all his life and me for several years, it really does prepare you to write for children.
What challenges did you face when trying to simplify the complex matter of UAPs for children?
That's another good question. Always that you say to yourself, well, I have 32 pages or 42 pages. I'm limited by basically 1,000 words or less. And so what do I include? What do I leave out? And that's always the biggest decision. What facts are accessible to kids? What questions do we raise? So, we went through a lot of that, deciding what to include in the book. And we did really deal with just crafts in this book and sightings and verifiable information.
Yeah, we wanted to do a nonfiction book because there's been so much fantasy and frankly nonsense out there that is entertaining for kids and grown-ups alike. But in terms of giving young people a grounding on this very strange phenomenon, there really isn't anything we found. So that's what we try to do.
That's just my AI meeting notes. I don't know why it joined up now, but that brings me to my next question. How did you ensure the book remains engaging and not overwhelming for children, given the profound subject matter?
Well, really, a lot of that has to do with the art too, I think. And the art, the illustrator for this book is Adam Gustavson, who has done numerous picture books before. And he's very adept at capturing moods and perspectives. And he's a very accomplished artist. So I would credit him to a large degree in terms of the success of the book, because it's very moody. I hope it engages children with the pictures, and it really is a joint effort. So, you provide information and he brings the illustrations to the page to make the information come alive.
And one of the interesting things he did, as Deb sort of mentioned, is the perspective from above. You usually don't see UFOs looking down on them. You see them looking up at them. But he got the interesting idea of showing what a UFO might look like from above, as if it was being observed by another craft or the Navy or whatever.
Or NASA.
So that was his particular contribution.
How did you decide what aspects of the phenomenon to include in the book and what to leave out? What would get kids' attention as opposed to scare them?
Again, we went back and forth on different things. What could children relate to? We started the book with two young people on a tennis court, because in children's books, you want to bring children into the story. And so that's how, we did start the book. And then we really went through the information we had and decided, is this something a child would understand? Certainly animals reacting to UFOs above them is something a child would understand. When there's a storm outside, your dog starts to shake or goes to the window. And so animals have this instinctive reaction to the world around them. And so we knew things like that. So we included, the cows in the field. So again, it was just a question of what's appropriate for children and what can they understand and relate to.
And also, that story that Debbie just mentioned about the two kids on the tennis court, that's a real story borrowed from my John Mack book. Another psychiatrist friend of John Mack's at Harvard had that experience when he was a kid, Wes Boyd. He told me about that, and that's in my John Mack book. So I got his permission to tell the story in our book because it relates to kids, two kids on a tennis court who see this and are dumbfounded and ask the grown-ups next to them, can you believe what you've just seen? And they said, no, they can't believe, they can't explain it. So that's another little touch we're quite proud of.
What do you hope children take away from your book, and how do you envision it might influence their understanding and perception of the world or universe?
I hope it piques their curiosity. And I hope they ask more questions. I hope they do more research when they're a little older. And I just want them to look up at the sky and wonder and think. And if they have been, have seen UFOs or have any experience with that paranormal world, I hope they'll feel more comfortable talking about it with other children and not feel odd or uncomfortable. So again, we just hope it provokes dialogue.
What advice would you give to any other authors or content creators that are trying to do the same, educate on the subject as having gone through it?
Do your research. See what's out there. Are there questions we haven't answered that you feel should be answered? There's always room for more thoughtful, well-done books. So
this is also a field that welcomes sort of bravery. I mean, to address the subject, John Mack was this famous psychiatrist at Harvard, and he was not intimidated to the point of abandoning his interest in these strange stories people were telling him. So, like with everything, I'm not holding us out as, particular examples of bravery. Every author who tackles a difficult subject goes through the same thing. But I think in this case, it's particularly important not to be intimidated by the ridicule factor, which has stymied research in this field for too many years.
How do you envision this book being used in educational settings? Do you see the potential resource for teaching science or critical thinking as an early age?
Well, I certainly hope it goes on the science shelf where it should go. And, again, when teachers are exploring the world, the physical world around them, I hope this will be a tool that they'll use.
Can you share any interesting anecdotes that went on during the process? Or funny stories?
Well, it was really just a matter of sending the manuscript back between our two desks in different parts of the apartment. And, one of us coming up with a word that the other didn't like. And the author's note was one of the more difficult parts of the book, because the question is, how much information do you include? Are you writing this to parents? Are you writing this to children? So I would say the first version we had was really too academic. And so we scrapped that and rewrote it. And there was a lot of discussion with the editor, who was, I must say, very supportive, the University of New Mexico Press. And we did get a lot of input from them. And in fact, the book was sent out to child psychiatrists and psychologists for a read to see if they thought it was appropriate and to see if they raised any issues that we should address in the book. So they, you know, certainly did the due diligence that a responsible publisher should do.
And also, you know, working with a collaborator is always challenging. We were lucky as a couple who, you know, learned to live together very happily over the years and share. We read each other's material. When Deb writes a book, I read it, vice versa. So we're used to critiquing each other's work and not getting, you know, ego involved in that and, you know, getting hurt feelings. So a lot of that back and forth went into this book, and it helps if you have a collaborator that you work with closely, that you respect. But it, you know, it's not easy working with a collaborator.
May I ask, was the book, I guess you'd say, written before you started working on the debrief article, or ever talked about courses?
Yeah. I mean, the debrief
So just
article,
synchronization and timing, huh?
yeah, timing is everything. I mean, it grew out of all the work I had started to do in the subject, because I mean, I had been looking into John Mack 17, going back 17 years. Yeah, I mean, things always build on what you've, you know, done before, although we didn't think of a children's book. But the debrief article came much later, when Leslie Kane heard about this high-level intelligence guy, David Grush, who was willing to come forward and say that he had heard, he didn't see, he didn't touch, but he had heard in his high-level contacts that the US government agencies had acquired, retrieved, intact or partially intact alien craft that can't be explained on Earth. So that came up just a few months ago, and we jumped on that.
Let me ask you this. So do you think in the future you'll be writing, let me say, children's books on alien bodies? Or just aliens? I don't want to say bodies. That'd be a horrible thing for children.
Yeah, right.
You know, I really haven't thought that far ahead, and it really depends on what comes out. And yeah, I don't know. All I do know is when there is a topic that I feel I'd like to work on, it speaks to me right away. And I'm not there yet in terms of another book, and I don't think Ralph is.
Yeah, no, we're very careful in this book not to go into realms of speculation. And even with the David Grush story, we stuck to, you know, what the government, this is one of the strengths of the stories I see, that he got approval from the government to tell us certain things. And that adds, it seems to us, it adds another level of credibility that the government had no national security problem with this information coming out. So it's not just some guy deciding to, you know, make some claims. It is that the government said, well, we have no problem if he wants to say this. So that added a kind of, you know, level of credibility. So we're very careful, you know, where we go in this field. And as like Debbie said, I don't see us, you know, branching off into, unless new stuff starts to come out, and stuff has been coming out all the time.
I probably should have prefaced that, like, if that was the next thing to come out that was factual, would that have been? That's probably how I should preface the question.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it was, David Grush said that, but it was not one of the things that the government had vetted in advance. So, you know, again, it didn't carry to us the level of verification that the comments that the government passed on for reporting.
Okay. Thank you guys for being here. And second interview, pleasure's mine. So again, your article, amazing. Children's books, amazing. Can you tell everybody where they can get it?
The book is available online, certainly at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and it's available at independent bookstores. We're up in New Hampshire for a few weeks now, and Water Street Books, which is our local bookstore, has copies. And in fact, we're going to be up at the UFO Festival in Exeter for Labor Day weekend.
Oh, that's cool.
Talking about the book. And if your indie store doesn't have it, they'll certainly order it for you. So anywhere you know that works for you, they'll get the book for you.
I can hold up the bookmark.
UFOs, Mystery in the Sky, Ralph and Deborah Blumenthal. So thank you both. I really appreciate it.
Doing a lot of appearances, so sure.